Okay, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon from Malta.
Good afternoon.
And good evening. Good evening from Jakarta, everyone, and thank you for joining us on time. My name is Georgina Mieke. I'm the founder of Internegri Migration. I'm based in Jakarta, and I will be your host for today's webinar. So this is our first webinar dedicated to Malta Permanent Residence Program, or MPRP, and we are honored to have distinguished speakers from CLA Malta to join us today. So I will do the introduction, and then after that, the CLA Malta team will do their presentation about MPRP, and then we continue with the Q&A session. Okay, so here we go. Here's the speaker for today's webinar. The first is John Caruana. John is the head of legal and immigration of CLA Malta. He has extensive experience in contractual, corporate, and immigration law. He advises on company formation, corporate restructuring, and legal documentation, and manages high net worth clients applying for multi-citizenship and residency by investment. He actively monitors legal developments to ensure up-to-date legal and immigration advisory services. And our second speaker is Sammut Satariano. He's the head of business development of CLA Malta. And he's the first point of contact for prospective investors in Malta. He leads strategic business growth and client development, and former head of business development unit at 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗄𝗆. He experienced in promoting foreign direct investment and Malta's technology sector. And he's a lecturer in emerging markets and Asia Pacific business. And before we start, allow me to introduce just a brief introduction about Internegri migration. So we started our journey in 2018 by promoting US EB5 investor program for green card. And then I followed with Spain Golden Visa at that time. And during pandemic, I started with a webinar for Canada immigration. And starting 2021, I started with Portugal Golden Visa and then expand from there. So here are some of the programs that we currently facilitate for the non-investment programs. It's a skilled worker programs. This is for Australia and Canada. And then another non-investment program is EB5, US Green Card, for the category other workers with unskilled job. And then retirement visa for EU countries, digital nomad visa for EU countries, and then company formation is IFSA Dubai, so you can open a company and then register your company and then apply for the residence permit. And for investment, entrepreneur visa, that's an active investment. And golden visa, EU golden visa, including Malta, that's for passive investment. And then another passive investment is for the EB5 US green card for investors. And you can see here some of the countries that we work with. Okay, for Malta, I will let the Malta team to explain. And then without further ado, it is now my pleasure to hand over the session to, who started? Isaac or John?
We'll be doing it together.
Yeah.
Okay, for the CLA Malta team for their presentation. Okay. John and Isaac, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction as well.
So let me just share our presentation.
Yes.
Can I confirm that you can see our presentation?
Yes, it's good.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, thank you for the introductions. So, we obviously represent CLA Malta. So, I'll give you a bit of a background of CLA Malta, how it all started, and what are our main core services that we provide. So, CLA is headquartered in the USA. CLA stands for Clifton Larson Allen. It is one of the largest networks in the world, and we have strong presence in the USA, Europe, but also the Asia Pacific. We joined CLA back in 2024. So prior to 2024, we were a much smaller firm. But today we employ 150 people here in Malta, and we are considered one of the largest business advisory and global mobility firms on the island. Me, myself, I've been with the firm for over 4 years. John has been slightly longer than I have. And obviously, one of our core services is global mobility. So we are predominantly an audit firm, but we also, over the years, over I think the past 10 years, have really focused on private individuals in providing services that are tailor-made for what these clients want. And we've seen a huge demand for global mobility. So whether it's permanent residence or actually obtaining a passport, these are all services that we've seen growing demand for. There have been some recent changes in legislation, particularly when it comes to the passport. But we can, again, I know the focus is permanent residence today, so we'll focus mostly on the MPRP. But I just wanted to obviously tell you that we also provide services when it comes to individuals who are interested in obtaining a Maltese passport based on merit and not on investment this time. So what we will cover today is mostly a bit of an introduction as to why prospective applicants should look at Malta, understanding the MPRP. So John is our expert mostly on the program. The options that we have, which sometimes are different to other jurisdictions. So the rent option is always a very lucrative option for most of our applicants. The type of properties that one can rent, the actual application process itself, other tax considerations, because it's good to mention that Malta is quite beneficial when you try and partner up when it comes to global mobility, but also corporate structures. So here in Malta, we have one of the lowest corporate tax rates in Europe. Effectively, it's only 5%. So we have a lot of our applicants that also decide to set up a Maltese structure here in Malta. And the last section will obviously be in terms of what we provide as a service as CLA. So let's move to the next slide. Sorry. So like I said, we've over 50 years of experience. We have a huge number of teams now. John's team, the legal team, and focus on global mobility, share around 15 individuals. So we are very well equipped for assisting clients with their next residence option or also passport option. Like I said, we are part of an international network called CLA Global, and we basically have presence in all the places, all regions of the world. So if you also need, assistance with other jurisdictions, we can also leverage the network that we form part of. Now, one quick question, and that is we often face, is where is Malta? And it is also a significant question. So we are the smallest EU member state in Europe. We're basically just a 1 hour, let's say, ferry ride from Sicily. Some of us think of us as an extension to Italy, but we're an independent country. Most of the Maltese do speak Italian and English, so our predominant language and national language is English and Maltese. And as a country, we are strategically located right in the middle of the Mediterranean, and we're quite well connected. So we're 3 hours away from London, a 1 hour flight from Rome, and we're also very close to Northern Africa. So Malta is not seen just as a small island in the middle of the Mediterranean, but also seen as a very strategic location within the whole context of Europe. So I don't know, John, when you want to jump in.
Yeah. So these are some of the advantages which one will find when residing in Malta. We are part of the Schengen, so anyone who obtains MPRP residency would be able to travel visa-free to a country within the Schengen area for a period of 90 days out of a 180-day period. Our official languages are English and Maltese. The fact that we have the English as an official language is, of course, helpful because, as we know, the majority of the population in the world speaks English. We do have a Mediterranean lifestyle, global connectivity, like Isaac was saying. Our health system, we do have a very well-regarded healthcare environment in Malta, an educational system with international recognition, and we are constantly ranked among the safest countries worldwide. Okay? So, what is the MPRP? Essentially, as the name implies, the MPRP is a way in which a beneficiary would be able to obtain Maltese permanent residency. It will apply both to the main applicant and, of course, the eligible dependents, which we shall go into later on, in line with the laws of Malta, who will be deemed as eligible to apply. Who it applies for? It applies only to qualifying third-country nationals, thus it does not apply to EU or EEA nationals. It only applies to those individuals who are non-EU. Okay. The main program benefits. So as we were saying, the program will result in one becoming permanent resident in Malta. You can include the family members. You would be able to obtain lifelong resident status, visa-free traveling, um, uh, which we have elaborated upon in the previous slides. One would also have access to Malta's healthcare and education environment. And very importantly as well, which is considered as quite a benefit, there is no mandatory requirement to reside permanently in Malta. So there is no minimum period required in Malta in order to apply for the MPRP. And also, once one becomes an MPRP beneficiary, it is not required for one to stay any certain period of days in Malta. Who can apply? So one needs to be at least 18 years of age in order to be eligible. The main applicant needs to have stable, regular financial resources. Of course, he needs to have a clear criminal record. And regarding health, the health and due diligence checks means that, of course, the authority will look into the health status of an applicant to ascertain if he shall become a burden on the Maltese health system. Of course, everything is taken on a case-by-case basis. Okay, regarding the assets, so in order for one to be eligible to apply for the MPRP, there are two main options. One must either have 500,000 euro in qualifying assets, okay, so out of which 150,000 must be in the form of financial assets, or else one must have at least 650,000 euro in assets, out of which 75,000 must be in the form of financial assets. What do we mean by assets? This could be anything. This could, for instance, it could be a property. It could be an investment. It could be anything.
It could be money in the bank.
It could be money in the bank. In fact, if it is the reference to financial asset can also mean money in the bank. Okay. What's important is that in the application we then provide proof of such assets. So in the case of a property, we will need to provide proof of property ownership and the property evaluation done by an architect or someone who is qualified to do such evaluations in order so that the authority has comfort in knowing how much the property is currently worth. Okay? Eligible dependents. So this slide essentially shows who can apply as a dependent of the main applicant. There is the spouse, children under 18, unmarried dependent, children aged 18 to 29. By dependent regard, because many of our applicants ask us, what does it mean by dependent children? It means that they would still mainly be studying at the university. Okay, typically they would not be working as well because of course they would be entirely dependent on the main applicant. And as I've been saying, of course, each case has its own merits. So each case would be treated on its own merits, but we can advise as much as we can on whether one may qualify as an eligible adult dependent who is entirely dependent on the main applicant. So there will be as well dependent parent or grandparents and adult children who are certified as disabled by a medical practitioner. Financial commitments. So, in order to apply for this program, there are all of these commitments which are written in the slide. The main one is, of course, that one would need to carry out a payment of €60,000 administration fee, covering all the involved parties, whether one is renting or purchasing a property in Malta, because of course this is one of the requirements in order to become a Maltese permanent resident. One would need to pay 37,000 government contribution fee. The property which one would need to purchase in Malta, if one opts for the purchase option, would need to be at least over €375,000 worth, or else one can also rent the property in Malta, in which case the minimum annual rent will need to be for €14,000 per year. It is worth mentioning that these requirements remain in place for 5 years from when one obtains Maltese permanent residency. After the first 5 years pass, then one would be able to rent or buy any property in Malta. But in order to maintain the Maltese residency cards, it's very important to still lease or buy a property. So it's very important for one to have a property registered in his name in order to maintain the residence cards. Then there would also need to be a €2,000 donation to a registered voluntary organization in Malta. Insurance, very important as well, health insurance for our family members, and an additional €7,500 will need to be paid per adult dependent, included in the application, excluding the spouse himself or herself. So, as we were saying, in order for one to apply for the MPRP, one would need to rent or purchase a property in Malta. Okay? Renting needs to be for a minimum of €14,000 annually for the first 5 years. Lower initial capital commitment, exactly. What we mean by lower initial capital commitment is, of course, the amount of €14,000 would be attractive for someone who does not wish to buy a property or wishes to buy a property at a later stage, because in the beginning, he may not have the share capital, he may not have the liquidity, thank you, in order to buy the property in Malta. Okay. This is regarding the purchase of property option, which we've been through.
Some clients also prefer to purchase a property because property in Malta has a very high value. And what we see every year is that value of property goes up quite significantly. So some clients who would be interested in buying property look at the long-term investment that they are making. But as John said, sometimes it is more cost effective to rent rather than to purchase a property.
Unless, of course, it is worth noting as well that one can rent in the beginning and then decide to purchase a property at a later stage. It's always an option. Mainly, we do have a lot of clients who opt for that in order to fast track the acquisition of the Maltese residence card, and then throughout the period, or even after the 5 years period, sometimes our clients do decide to buy a property.
So being a small island, we have quite a diverse portfolio of properties. So obviously we have beautiful properties which are seafront, other properties which are more in the rural area, and other properties which are basically in the city. We decided to show you some properties that one can look at. So there are different apartments, penthouses. Penthouses, again, because not everybody uses the same terminology, would be basically a top floor apartment. And obviously, because of the rent commitment, which is not too high, you have quite a good choice of apartments and localities you can look at. Yes, then we have obviously some traditional housing. So the House of Character is quite a Maltese symbol. So these are old buildings with very distinguished features, which you can find. They're also very popular with foreigners who are not accustomed to seeing these type of, houses. They will be a bit on the higher side in terms of renting or buying, but they're also very beautiful because they're authentic to the Maltese island. Then obviously there's also, if you're after a more luxurious property, you can go for villas or bungalows, which you can also find in Malta. So Before we open, maybe there are some quick questions. I don't know, John, if you'd like to delve into the recent changes there were in the MPRP.
So mainly the recent changes where the program became more attractive as a whole because before they were said in the program as a whole was a bit more expensive than it is currently at this stage. Of course, the government is constantly trying to attract foreign entrepreneurs or even foreign third-country nationals from a general point of view in order to come and apply for the MPRP. The main change was made in relation to the contribution of 37,000 because before there was a distinction being made between those who rent or buy a property in Malta. That distinction was removed, and now whether you buy or whether you rent a property, the amount remains the same. Thus, it is that of 37,000 euro because prior to that it was around 58,000 euro when one chooses to rent a property. It's no longer that. Thus, it is 37,000 whether you choose to buy or rent. That is the main distinguishing feature.
Temporary residence.
And of course, yes, there is also the temporary residence permit. Nowadays, through the recent changes, one can also apply for the temporary residence permit. So one can apply for Maltese residency at the start of the application of the MPRP application rather than waiting for the whole application to be processed in order to obtain the Maltese residency card. So when one would have the option essentially that rather than waiting to obtain all the required documents because they are quite reasonable documents to apply for such an application, but of course, one may take quite some time to compile all the required documents as a whole. So what the agency did was that it created the initiative of the temporary residence permit, where one will be able to compile a simplified documents list. We will, of course, let the applicant know what such list constitutes of, but typically it would request, for instance, like documents like the passport, some application forms, and the lease agreement in Malta, in order for one to be able to apply for a Maltese residency card, of which the duration shall be of that of 1 year, so that the applicant would be given the chance in order to be able to submit as well the MPRP application. The MPRP application would then be able to be submitted needs to be submitted actually within around 6 months from when one obtains the Maltese temporary residence permit.
I think it's also important that, again, like John said, rather than stay waiting for the application to be processed and approved, now they give you the option that you can still move to more than temporarily live there until the application is being processed. Furthermore, again, one maybe suggestion from our end and from our experience, the key point around this is obviously transparency. So we have a very high success rate because our clients are transparent with us. So the agency expects us as licensed agents to give them credible information. And to be able to do so, we would have to depend on information being given by the client. So when it comes to, for example, source of wealth, we always liaise with our clients to create a very detailed package to the agency. And it has been now become quite common that the questions then posed by the agency are lower because we know exactly what they want and what they will ask. So we always say that if you are transparent with us, we will have no issues with the application. We have a very good relationship with the agency. So John has been in daily, I think, contact with the agency for the past 7-8 years. And again, we have a huge portfolio of MPRP clients coming from different jurisdictions. China remains a predominant market, but we've seen also now more interest coming from Turkey, North Africa, India, the Asia Pacific. So we have seen now quite a wide portfolio of clients who are interested in the Malta Permanent Residence Program.
To add upon what Isaac is saying as well regarding, because many of our clients ask us, what do I need to provide regarding source of funds and source of wealth documentation? And the answer is almost always the same. Of course, it depends on the client's circumstances. For instance, if the client is the owner of a company and his income is mainly constituted of dividends coming from that company, then we will require the dividend certificate. We will require the company's audited financial statements in order showing how much dividend the client would have earned during a certain financial year. And if the client's income has been through employment, we will require payslips or even the employment contract himself showing how much an applicant is earning. It depends. We've also had clients whose income has been through inheritance. As long as we can substantiate where the income is coming from, then it should be fine. Because from our end, what the main interest is, of course, into understanding from where the money is coming from, the trail of funds. That's very important when applying for such a program as well, because of course we need to make sure that the funds have all been obtained. So the funds which shall be used for this application have all been obtained in a legitimate manner. Okay, that's the main concern of the agency.
Just to conclude, because we really like to leave some time for questions, is obviously we do not just assist with the legal side of things in terms of the application, but we also assist with finding the right property. So we obviously have a good network of real estate partners that we work with. So we handle basically from the start till the end with anything the applicant or the beneficiary would need. Even eventually if they need, help with securing private schooling, that is also something we do. And we try and obviously help the client with all aspects of moving or shifting their residence to another country, which again, I know is a daunting exercise, but we try to make it as smooth as possible. We will stop here for now, and I don't know if there are maybe any questions from the audience.